Alright, so today we have a really simple table build. You can use this as an end table, a plant table, whatever, but this one in particular is going to be 12 inches deep by 24 inches long by 28 inches high. And these are all the materials you need. And you'll notice that there aren't any pencils or many tools on there, but that's because pencils are overrated. And this is built solely out of furring strips that you can get at Lowe's or Home Depot, whatever, for about, well, now after COVID they're about $2 to $3 a piece, but it is what it is. And when I say you don't need a pencil, you don't need a pencil. I just hold, after I make my first measurement, which was 28 inches in this case for the legs, I just hold the piece of wood flush to the end up against the saw blade, and I can make the exact cut every time because I need 4 of them, right? So it's better than making a line and marking it. You're actually going to have more of an accurate cut if you just hold the piece up to the saw blade, and that's just how that works out. So this project, it literally took me about 15 minutes to do, and there's not much skipping around in this video. You can see it's actually like real time, and it doesn't take very long. So I wanted to show you guys just how simple this was to build. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist, and you can bust these out, and if you want to sell them or whatever, you can make these out of wood pallets. They don't have to be out of furring strips, but in this case, I wasn't trying to go necessarily budget. It was just, a quick build that, is pretty self-explanatory. And it doesn't have to be this size. You can build it any size you want, but as you saw, I held the tape measure up there, and you get an exact line. If you hold it to the tooth of the saw blade, you'll get your exact line, and then you just simply move your tape measure away and make your cut. You don't need a pencil. And now I just have to repeat that process, 3 more times, and then I'll have my, basically my basic frame. This is just going to be the depth. So, because I want it to be 12 inches deep, the thickness of the wood is 3/4 of an inch. So I had to make it 10 and 3/4 10 and a half, because 3/4 and 3/4, inch and a half. So I have to subtract that from 12 inches, which would be 10 and a half. As you can see, I'm just making my 24-inch cuts now for the length. You repeat that. You need 4 of those. This build really doesn't get any simpler. Doesn't get any more accurate than that. I'm starting to cut my top pieces out, but I'm not really sure how many I need. I just kind of guesstimate and make enough, because I need tops and bottoms. So because I'm making 2 rows, a top and a bottom row, obviously. So I just started going for it and cutting a bunch out, and then I can kind of estimate. Once I have more than enough for the top, I'll know how many I need for the bottom. And when I buy lumber, I always overestimate, because you can always take a piece back. If you have a receipt and you want your $3 back or whatever it may be, you just return it, and you don't have to waste any material. But in my case, I usually end up keeping the extra anyway, because I use it on other projects most of the time. I always like to have some scrap wood laying around. That's everything. And this is just how simple it is. And by the way, I'm doing this without a square. Like, if you have a framing square, it'd be even nicer to make sure that your work is square, but I'm just literally basing it off of the edges of, my cuts are square because I used a miter saw, but you don't necessarily have to make You don't have to use a miter saw. You could use a hand saw, but in this case, making all these cuts, it just makes it a lot easier, and you know your cuts are going to be perfect. Outside of that, the nail gun, you don't have to use a nail gun either, but you know, you can just hold your material down and bam, it's done. Like, you know, if you were nailing this by hand or if you were using screws, you have it has the potential to split your wood, and you know, a nail gun's just a lot easier. In this case, I'm using 1.5" staples because the thickness of the material is 3/4, so two of them, you know, make 1.5", but it does still poke through the slightest bit. But I'd rather it poke through the slightest bit than get 1.25" staples and have it not go in deep enough, because ultimately all these staples are going to be on the inside of the table where you're not going to be grabbing it or touching it, so it doesn't matter that they poke through the slightest bit, and it's so slight that, you know, you can't even really see it. And like I said, this is all in real time, so what you're seeing is what it is. This is reality based. I'm not going to throw a million edits into this, you know, and try to pretend like I got it done and whipped it up real quick. I literally whipped it up real quick. I wanted to make it 3 inches from the second shelf, or the first shelf rather. I wanted it to be 3 inches off the floor. I could have made it level with the floor, or I could have made it 1 inch off the floor, whatever you decide to do. But ultimately I just thought that this had the best look, so I just guesstimated, and it didn't really matter either way. Also, with all the material put together in this project, I had about $30 wrapped up in it, so that's the basic frame. Well, not really, but that's when I'm starting to get it together. And like I said, I have no square. This is all eyeballed, and spoiler alert, it ends up being square anyway, so you know, you can't really screw this up. This isn't hard to do. I think a lot of people are afraid to, you know, they'd go somewhere and buy this table for $75 or $100, you know, to put some herbs on, or flowers or whatever, some statues, and they'll go to Hobby Lobby and, you know, spend $75 to $100 on this, and it's so much more rewarding if you just build it yourself. So not bad for eyeballing. It doesn't teeter or anything, and you can bust this out in 15 minutes and you have yourself a stand, and it's a nice looking stand. You know, everybody wants to be rustic these days, so it is what it is. Now here I am repeating the process for the top and bottom, and I figured I need 9 for the top and 8 for the bottom, but depending on the length of your table, it could vary. And this is another part that I eyeballed. You know, a lot of people will get discouraged, like, well, how do you space them apart? How many do I need? You could have used less than this. I mean, I chose to make them a little closer together, so you just have to like see how many fit on there and then work out the difference by eyeballing it. And these are the steps, you know, like that people that don't do this a lot, like that don't, you know, do woodworking or anything, they think like, well, how do you come up with stuff like that? I make it all up as I go. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, this is all guesstimation, and it just works out in the end. I have a general plan, and things always change in your plans, whether you're building a car or you're building a house. Things are going to change 100 times, but as long as you have a general idea of what you want it to look like, just go for it, and the end result's always rewarding, especially when you can put your stuff on it and it's done. So I'm just trying to like guesstimate the right gappage. Obviously it takes some time sometimes, because you know, when you're dealing with 9 pieces, you don't want one gap to be huge and then the last gap to be, you know, real narrow. So you just kind of have to work it out. Use your eyeballs, don't be afraid. Now every time you shoot a nail into one of these, they all jump and move, so you know, you have to keep readjusting them. But I always do the ends first. I always put the far end, you know, both end pieces on first, and then you work it out as you go down. You kind of know. And believe it or not, built out of furring strips and how narrow these pieces are, you know, they're only 3/4 of an inch thick. This is a sturdy table. I mean, I could stand on this. I could use it as a step stool. I mean, it can hold a lot of weight. I wouldn't recommend, you know, sitting on it or, you know, jumping on it, but, you know, you probably could. And also, you don't have to use furring strips for the legs. You could use 2x4s, or you know, you could use thicker lumber, but you're going to have a little bit more money into your material. This part you have to be careful if you're using a nail gun, because if you have it at the slightest angle, it's going to shoot out the side. You're going into 3/4 inch stock, so you have to really be careful it goes straight down in. And luckily, out of the, you know, whatever 70 staples I used, I didn't shoot one out. I got lucky. But if that happens, you just cut it off with a pair of dikes and you won't ever be able to tell anyway. Now this is polyurethane. It's good to polyurethane it, and that protects it if you drip water on it, or, you know, have a drink ring or anything, a cup ring, and then that's a finished product. So don't be afraid to build your own. Go out and do it, and thank you for watching.